phrases.
I'm sorry, I forgot to hit record, so.
So I think, Nagisa, you can
Advance to the next one.
advance to the next slide. So this here is like if we are able to zoom in a little bit, this gives you kind of like a last planting date for your second season crops. So looking at things that do well in cooler temperatures, right? And so especially things like beets, broccoli, you can do second plantings of bush beans. You can do second plantings of things like tomatoes, but unless if you're really doing an intensive gardening, you probably won't do a second succession of tomatoes. But the others really are good to kind of keep in mind in terms of when you want to plant those by in order to still get a harvest, right? And so that's the main goal, is to plant them, because I mean, we could start seeds in November probably, but we're not going to get a harvest. So you want to make sure that you start those with enough growing days such that you can actually get a fruiting harvest. So next slide, please.
Sorry, I think I made it too big. Okay. Here we go.
In terms of timeline, there we go. So 12 to 14 weeks before the last killing frost, you want to do like direct sowing of these fast maturing vegetables. So you can do your beans, your cucumbers, summer squash. But at this time, you can also sow parsnips and rutabagas, right? And those will actually grow over the winter, and you'll harvest those in the spring. And then you can see, and I think Nagisa will post these, so I don't have to read through all of
exactly
the dates, but you can see just in terms of like, kind of backing up your plans, right? So, all right, today is, July 20th. So, figuring out the dates for planting based on our frost dates. So, okay, next slide, please. One thing to keep in mind, which I think is really easy to forget, and Al will probably echo this, is don't forget to water your vegetables, even in this like fall planting. Even when temperatures cool down, the plants still need water. So one, make sure you keep your beds watered. And so you can, go through some of the different methods that we've shown already, but this is particularly important also for some of the direct sown crops. So you can do carrots, beets, greens, and such, but you want to make sure that you keep those watered. Next slide, please.
Oh, I think we can actually hand over to Al at this point.
Yes.
Because we're going to save seed saving for next time.
The next one?
Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Al, are you ready to go?
I am here. Yeah, I am here, but I don't have access to my computer, so I'm going to have to do this by without showing a PowerPoint.
Well, then hang on. Let's just let's stop here for a moment and see if we have any questions from the people who've been watching. Does anybody have any questions? Like, do we fully answer Sherry's questions about how to get things started in hot weather?
You did. It's something that I've been struggling with, and I feel like getting through spring and summer and juggling trying to grow more and also have to have a real job that pays the bills. I sometimes peter out. But the little tips that you've given me are helpful, especially with like the shade cloth covering, with watering once things are in place is really helpful. Yeah, and there's just a lot of little things being kind of, I've always been a chef in a kitchen. So this is, I understand food and what I want to get as an end result to cook with, but the growing and to get information from other people and see how they grow or how they intersperse crops together is very helpful to me. Yeah.
Great. Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, Sherry, by the way, if you have a porch, that's really the easiest way. I have great luck starting seeds on my porch because there's enough covered area and enough partial sun to really let things grow well.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that information.
Okay, well, then if there are no other questions, I'll hand it over to Al for a brief few minutes because
Yeah.
we do have to end on time tonight because we have another session starting in a few minutes. So Al, over to you to talk about the later season crops.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I'll just elaborate on a few things that some of the other guys have said. And I plant lettuce and other greens about every 3 weeks. And I do that right up until August 20th. So on August 20th, I happen to, but just because of my rotation, I have a lot of space in my garden at that point. And I put a lot of lettuce and other greens in. When I say other greens, I'm not talking about the, what do you call it, the Asian greens, but particularly lettuce type greens. And those will germinate fairly well in August. It's getting a little cooler. The days are getting a little better. And they'll grow right through the fall. And you will be harvesting, full heads of lettuce by about Thanksgiving. Now, when I say plant on August 20th, that could be direct seeded in the ground. But if you transplant just the way Ariana showed you how, and you have a good porch, like Gisa mentioned, which I think is really helpful. You can plant them inside and then just transplant them out. Probably about 3 weeks later, they should be in the ground about somewhere around September 10th. And, it'll take they'll grow fairly well through the end of September, and then they'll really slow down. We always have an Indian summer. They'll pick up again, and it'll just grow slowly through the fall. But again, you can stretch that lettuce harvest, particularly lettuce and other greens, right through the fall. The other thing I want to talk about is turnips, because turnips is something you can plant quite late. And I guess kohlrabi would be the same. I don't plant kohlrabi, but I think it's pretty similar. But when we moved to New Jersey, an old timer told me you plant turnips on August 8th. If you plant them before then, you're going to have trouble with the root maggot. You plant late in them, you're not going to get good turnips. So I always shoot for August 8th. And that's a good time too. It's a good crop if you've got a little hole or something, you already pulled some lettuce out. You get a little extra space. The turnips are really quick to germinate. They germinate any time of year. And again, by Thanksgiving or even by the end of October, you've got some really good turnips in there. Usually after the end of October, when the weather starts to turn cooler, the greens start to deteriorate. So if you want to harvest them for greens, the bulbs won't be as big by the end of October, but the greens will be great. If you let them go longer, the greens are going to deteriorate. They'll still be edible, but they just won't look as good. But the bulbs will keep getting bigger right up to almost through Christmas time. We often don't harvest our turnips until after Christmas. So I think Ariana touched on some of the, I think she planted kale earlier in the program. And I plant a substantial amount of fall brassicas, which includes kale and broccoli, cabbages. Brussels sprouts, I don't, because I would have to plant earlier, and I just have some space come up in the garden. Usually I plant when the onions come out, which is onion and garlic comes out, which is usually late July. So I seed those, as Ariana showed you, about the 1st of July. And I put them out about 3 or 4 weeks later when they start to fill up the pots. Of those plants, I would say you could still plant kale and get a decent crop, and that kale will overwinter. We harvest a lot of kale in April and May. It overwinters well. We harvest some in the wintertime. Basically keep picking it in the fall. There's not a lot left in the winter, and then it'll just start picking up again. If you do get a chance next year to plant early, and you can do your seeding about July 1st, you can plant a lot of those things. Again, the broccoli, cabbages, cauliflower, but yeah, kale and broccoli probably do the best. And yeah, I'll cut it off there. Like you said, just want to give a couple of details on a few other crops that we've talked about.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Al. Okay, everyone. I think that wraps it up for tonight. If you have any other questions, feel free to send us an email and we'll get right back to you with answers. And of course, think of these as your garden doctors, because they can help you anytime during the season if you run into some challenges. Okay. Happy growing, everyone, and see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.